I remember that night like it was yesterday. The station was nearly empty, the air thick with an eerie stillness. A distant hum echoed through the tunnels, an almost imperceptible whisper that sent a shiver down my spine. The flickering lamps above cast unsettling shadows, elongating my own figure in unnatural ways. I should have taken a taxi, but I decided to wait for the last train of the night. A mistake I will never forget. When the train finally arrived, something felt off. The train was old, as if it had come from a forgotten decade. Its silver metal frame reflected the dim light, and the windows were darkened. A shiver ran down my spine when I noticed there was no visible conductor. The doors opened with a prolonged hiss, like a metallic whisper inviting me in. I hesitated, but I didn't want to be alone at the deserted station. I stepped inside, and immediately, the air changed. The interior of the carriage was far too quiet. The faint scent of rust and something stale filled my nostrils. The few passengers sitting there looked strange, pale, motionless, as if trapped in a trance. None of them looked around. None of them even blinked. I tried to ignore the growing unease and took a seat. The train took off, gaining speed abruptly. I looked out the window, expecting to see familiar stations passing by, but all I saw was an endless tunnel of darkness. No stations, no signs, just shadows crawling along the walls. I started feeling suffocated. The absolute silence was unbearable, except for a faint scratching noise, like nails dragging against metal. My heart pounded when I noticed a terrible detail. Their reflections in the window were wrong. They seemed to move independently from their bodies. One of them, a man in a gray suit, slowly turned his head toward me, but only in the reflection. In reality, he remained completely still. I had to get out. I stood up quickly and rushed to the doors. I pressed the buttons frantically, but they wouldn't open. The train kept speeding up at an impossible rate. My hands trembled. I banged on the door, screamed, but no one reacted. Then, the lights inside the carriage flickered. A faint whisper filled the air, growing louder, layered with different voices murmuring incoherent words. The passengers twitched. Their heads jerked slightly. When the lights returned to normal, they had all turned to face me. Their blank faces stared directly at me. One by one, their mouths slowly opened wider and wider, stretching far beyond what was humanly possible. No sound came out, but the whispering in my ears became deafening. The train came to an abrupt stop, throwing me against the seats. I looked outside and saw that we were at an abandoned station. Rusted signs indicated a name I knew well, Kimling, the name of the station where, according to legend, the living don't get off and the dead don't leave. Before I could react, I felt cold hands grabbing my arms and legs. I looked down. The passengers were rising, but their eyes were now empty, black as the void itself. My chest tightened, my breath came in short gasps. The world started spinning, my vision fading to darkness. I woke up hours later, lying on a bench at the station where I had first boarded. The train was gone. There was no sign of the passengers. Only a crumpled note beside me, with a single handwritten sentence. Never take the last train. Even now, I still hear the whisper of the train in my nightmares. Some nights, I wake up gasping for air, my wrist ice cold, as if those hands never really let go. I never took a train again. I never will. It was late, just past midnight, when Eric saw it for the first time. Standing alone on the dimly lit platform of a Stockholm metro station, he noticed a train approaching, but something was off. The carriages were silver, unpainted, gleaming under the flickering fluorescent lights. It moved too silently, the usual hum and clatter of the metro strangely absent. When the doors slid open, the interior was eerily empty, save for a few motionless passengers with vacant, hollow eyes. Eric hesitated, a cold dread creeping up his spine. Something inside told him not to step aboard. He turned away for only a second, and when he looked back, the train was gone. This is the legend of Silverpilen, the Silver Arrow. In the early 1960s, Stockholm's metro system introduced a unique train, unlike any other in the fleet. Unlike the standard green-painted carriages, this one was bare metal, giving it an almost spectral appearance. Initially used only as a backup, the train rarely ran on regular schedules. Its unusual look and infrequent appearances led to whispers, stories, legends. Over time, commuters began to report unsettling encounters. A silver train arriving at stations that weren't listed. Doors opening to reveal carriages filled with ghostly figures. People who boarded, only to vanish without a trace. Many stories tie Silverpilen to the abandoned Kimling station, an unfinished stop on the Blue Line. And with it came a chilling phrase that still lingers among locals. Only the dead get off at Kimling. One of the most terrifying accounts comes from a metro worker who claimed to have seen Silverpilen late one night while closing a station. He swore that as the train passed, he could see pale, almost translucent passengers inside, their mouths moving as if whispering, but no sound came through the glass. The train never stopped. It simply glided past, disappearing into the darkness of the tunnel. When he reported it the next morning, no such train had been scheduled. Another legend tells of a woman who boarded Silverpilen by mistake. She sat in an empty carriage, but as the train moved, she began to feel a creeping unease. The air grew colder, and when she glanced at her reflection in the window, she saw that the other passengers, who had seemed human at first, now had empty, black voids where their eyes should have been. She tried to get up, but her body wouldn't move. Time stretched, the ride feeling endless, until the train finally stopped at Kimling. Just as the doors opened, she managed to force herself out. She turned back just in time to see the train vanishing into darkness, the figures inside watching her as the doors closed. Some dismissed these tales as urban myths, a mix of overactive imaginations and Stockholm's eerie underground tunnels playing tricks on the mind. But others believe Silverpilen is more than just an abandoned train. A portal, a phantom train ferrying lost souls to a destination unknown. Even today, late-night commuters sometimes report a strange silver glint in the darkness of the tunnels. A glimpse of something that shouldn't be there. And if you ever see it, if the silver arrow ever stops in front of you, think carefully before stepping inside. You may never get off. The subway car rattled as it approached its next stop, the dim overhead lights flickering erratically. Daniel, a Boston commuter, sighed and rubbed his eyes. Another late night at work. As the train slowed, he noticed a woman standing alone on the platform, dressed in outdated clothing, long skirts, lace-trimmed sleeves, and a bonnet shading her face. She didn't move, didn't react to the rush of wind from the train. The doors slid open, but she remained motionless. A strange unease crept over Daniel. Something felt wrong. Then, just as suddenly as she appeared, she faded into nothingness. His breath hitched. He wasn't the only one who had seen her. An older man nearby paled, whispering under his breath, "Another one." This is the legend of the ghosts of the Tremont Street subway. In the late 19th century, Boston was expanding rapidly, and with it, the need for a more efficient public transportation system. The Boston Elevated Railway Company began construction on what would become the Tremont Street subway, the first subway in North America. But as workers dug beneath the city, they made a chilling discovery, a forgotten burial ground. Despite the warnings of superstitious locals, construction pressed on, disturbing the resting places of countless souls. Strange occurrences began almost immediately. Workers spoke of eerie whispers echoing through the tunnels, shadows moving where no light should cast them, and tools vanishing, only to reappear in impossible places. Some claimed they saw figures in tattered clothing, their hollow eyes watching from the darkness, before vanishing into the unfinished walls. Even after the subway opened to the public, the hauntings continued. Commuters reported chilling drafts with no source, ghostly figures seen reflected in train windows, but when they turned, no one was there. Some late-night riders have spoken of entire empty trains moving on their own, passing through stations with no conductor aboard. One of the most terrifying stories comes from a subway conductor who encountered a lone woman on a nearly empty platform. She stood motionless, dressed in 19th century attire, her face hidden beneath the shadow of her bonnet. Concerned, he stepped forward, urging her to board. But as he reached out, she disappeared into thin air. The platform had been empty all along. A former subway maintenance worker, Thomas Greaves, had an even more horrifying experience deep in the tunnels. One night, while repairing a section of the track, he heard faint whispers. At first, he assumed it was his co-workers, but he was alone. The whispers grew louder, overlapping voices murmuring just beyond the edge of the dim tunnel lights. Then, a sudden chill washed over him. He turned, and for a brief second, he saw a shadowy figure standing in the darkness, just at the edge of his vision. As he reached for his flashlight, the power flickered, plunging the tunnel into total darkness. When the lights returned, the figure was gone, but his toolbox had been moved several feet down the tunnel. More disturbing still, in recent years, reports of supernatural encounters have increased, especially during ongoing renovations. Some workers claim the spirits are restless, angered by yet another disturbance to their long-forgotten graves. Even newspapers have documented these eerie occurrences. In 2019, the Boston Globe published an article titled "Phantoms of the Underground," detailing reports from multiple subway workers who refused to enter certain tunnels alone. One veteran conductor recalled hearing a disembodied voice whispering his name just before the power went out across the entire line. To this day, the Tremont Street subway remains operational, and while thousands ride its tunnels daily without incident, some still speak of whispers in the dark, shadowy passengers who never disembark, and ghostly figures standing along the platforms. So, if you ever find yourself on a late-night train in Boston, pay close attention. That person sitting beside you might not be there at all. They might just be one of the original passengers, still taking their eternal ride beneath the city. The night was cold, and the air was thick with silence, broken only by the distant croak of a frog and the occasional rustle of leaves. Alex and his friends had heard the stories, but they never believed them until they saw it. A flickering, floating light hovered just above the railroad tracks, swaying gently as if held by an invisible hand. It was smaller than a lantern, its glow an eerie mix of yellow and white. The group stood frozen, watching as the light bobbed closer, pulsing, shifting in intensity. And then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it vanished. This is the legend of the Gurdon light. In the early 20th century, the small town of Gurdon, Arkansas, was a bustling hub for the Missouri Pacific Railroad. Trains chugged through daily, transporting goods and passengers across the country. But beneath the town's industrious exterior lay a tale that would send shivers down the spine of even the most seasoned rail workers. It was a cold December night in 1931 when railway foreman William McLean met a tragic end. Known for his strict demeanor, McLean had a contentious relationship with many of his crew. On that fateful night, tensions boiled over during an argument with a worker named Lewis McBride. In a fit of rage, McBride bludgeoned McLean to death with a railroad spike maul. He was swiftly arrested, tried, and executed for his crime. But the story didn't end there. Shortly after McLean's death, eerie lights began appearing along the railroad tracks near Gurdon. Described as a floating, glowing orb, the light would hover above the tracks, swaying gently as if carried by an unseen force. Some believed it was the spirit of McLean, lantern in hand, eternally patrolling the rails. Others thought it might be McBride, condemned to wander the site of his crime. Over the decades, the phenomenon became known as the Gurdon Light. Scientists have attempted to explain it, suggesting causes like swamp gas or the piezoelectric effect from the area's quartz-filled ground. Yet, no definitive explanation has been found. The light continues to appear, undeterred by weather or season, intriguing both skeptics and believers alike. One of the most terrifying encounters happened in 1994 when a group of local teenagers ventured down the tracks after dark. One of them, a boy named Kevin, swore that the light darted toward them suddenly, causing them to flee in terror. He claimed that, just before turning away, he saw a shadowy figure standing beside the glowing orb, a figure dressed in an old railway uniform. More disturbing still, in recent years, travelers have reported hearing footsteps crunching on the gravel near the tracks, only to turn and find no one there. Some claim to have heard the distant echo of a phantom train whistle, even though the tracks have long been abandoned. To this day, visitors flock to Gurdon, hoping to catch a glimpse of the mysterious light. Some leave with tales of their own encounters, while others depart with only the chill of the Arkansas night. But all agree, there's something unsettling about those quiet tracks and the spectral glow that dances above them. So, if you ever find yourself in Gurdon after dark, venture down to the old railroad tracks. You might just see the Gurdon Light for yourself, a haunting reminder of a violent past and the mysteries that linger long after the last train has passed. And that brings us to the end of tonight's journey through the most chilling train horror stories ever told. From spectral passengers to ghostly lanterns swaying in the darkness, these legends remind us that some tragedies never truly fade. They echo through time, waiting for unsuspecting travelers to witness them. But tell me, which of these stories haunted you the most? Have you ever experienced something eerie while riding a train? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed these terrifying tales, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another chilling story. And remember, the next time you step onto an empty train late at night, take a good look at the passengers around you. Some of them might not be there at all. Until next time, stay safe and keep your eyes open. You never know who or what might be watching.